Good morning, Year 11. This is a short video of the work that is required from you for A Study in Pink, Episode 1 of Sherlock. As a small incentive for watching these summary videos, here are the answers to the definitions task for Episode 1. One of the tasks that you are asked to do is a viewing log. So I've put an example for each of the episodes on the PowerPoint on Google Classroom of what that looks like for me. Obviously, everyone is going to have their own style, but what I do is I watch the episode with my laptop and I make notes about anything that's interesting, quotes, techniques, those kinds of things, because I find that really helps me later on. In fact, what I would do when it came to studying is I would print these or go over them on my laptop and highlight different sections. So for example, have one color for techniques. I'm not going to read through all of this. As I said, it is available on Google Classroom, and it is going to help me a lot when it comes to writing my essay later. Because this is the first episode in a new series, we're just going to look at the introductions or the opening scenes that involve John and Sherlock. So John's the one at the top. He's introduced through his old friend Stanford. Stanford and John trained together at Bart's, which is a medical hospital in London, but from then on their lives have very, very different trajectories. Stanford is the one that introduces John to Sherlock. Sherlock uses the facilities at Bart's, even though he's not technically employed there. I've included some shots, so the mid shot that allows you to compare John and Stanford, and the interesting or indirect shots that show Sherlock. He's often surrounded by equipment, and this is a big change from the old stories because that equipment simply didn't exist in the original texts. Rather than introducing himself or making small pleasantries or small talk, Sherlock analyzes John from the start. He says Afghanistan or Iraq. Now on to the clues that Sherlock looks for when he's trying to solve a crime. This is a bit of a jump forward in the story, but I'm assuming at this point that you've already watched episode 1 and taken your own notes. The top two images are extreme close-ups on a body part or a word. Okay, when Sherlock realizes that Rache, the German word for revenge, is the word that's carved there, it comes up on the screen so that the audience can keep up with Sherlock's deductions. Later, when they're chasing somebody, he can see a map of London and he can work out the route to cut off the cab driver. This really quick reasoning shows you just how impressive Sherlock's brain is and how fast he can think compared to the ordinary person. On the last slide, the German there is a bit of a red herring. That means a distraction away from solving the case. It's something that is used in a lot of crime fiction to make the reader think that there are more possibilities or to send you on a different trail of thought. Another one of those in this episode is Mycroft, although he's not named straight away. All we see is John threatened into a car using public phone boxes and CCTV. This means that the person threatening or manipulating him has a lot of power to control those technologies because they're supposed to be public. The man he then meets has his therapist's notes, and while the therapist thinks that John is haunted by the war, this man says, actually, this is a very stressful environment right now and you're not shaking at all. Rather than being haunted by the war, you miss it. This gives us a little bit more information, not only about the kind of world that Sherlock exists in, but the kind of man that John is. The first task that you're going to do independently is about characterization. So that includes writing down adjectives or descriptions, including quotes if possible, about Sherlock and John Watson. And you can do this as two separate mind maps or as a Venn diagram where you talk about the differences and the similarities between the two. The next task involves you watching a scene again. It is the scene where John and Sherlock are in a cab or a taxi, and Sherlock is explaining how he knew the things that he knew about John before they met. The question that is set for you is on the screen. How has the composer used montage to effectively showcase Sherlock's methods of rational thought and deduction? So the first thing that you do is the same as always. You identify any words in the question that you don't understand and you look them up so that the question makes sense to you. Then when you're doing your teal paragraph, I've started the sentences for you. You don't have to use these if you are feeling confident. It is only for the people who need a little bit more help with their structure. Remember, your teal is your minimum, not your maximum, and if you would like to include more examples, particularly film techniques or quotes, please do. You start then by rewording the question. So I've put as my T, my topic, in this scene, the composer has used montage to, and then you need to describe it. You go through your example and explain it, That example must include a film technique, and then I've linked it for you. Again, please do this yourself if you can. This task is somewhat of an extension. I want everybody to look at the blog online, but you don't necessarily have to answer all of the questions in full sentences. You can just make some summary notes about the blog in general if you would like. John's blog is important because in the original stories, he wrote for a newspaper. This has been modernized to a blog, and it helps us understand what kind of person John is through the way that he writes about his adventures with Sherlock. I've got some points to focus on here. The first one I've just said, how does the blog contribute to our understanding of his character? Why have the producers bothered to give him a blog? They could have just left that as a part of the story, but to create the blog in real life gives readers and viewers something that they couldn't have before multimodal text existed. There's also some dot points about how this deepens audience engagement and what other texts have similar kinds of additions or fan fictions or extra stories or spin-offs that help you understand more about what's going on than you would be able to if this were a traditional novel. Hopefully this video helps you a little bit with episode 1. You're up to watching episode 2 when you finished all of these tasks, and please remember that you can email me or message me on Google Classroom at any point to get some extra help.